Welcome to the Emancipated Mind Show. My name is Anneshia Freeman. I'm also known as the locksmith because I make keys for locks in the mind. I'm an award-winning master-level therapist, and I also have an MBA. I'm the creator of a cognitive restructuring program entitled The Lies That Bind. This show exposes and challenges dysfunctional unconscious beliefs that cause people to engage in self-defeating behaviors repeatedly despite the consequences. This show is streamed live via Facebook and YouTube every Thursday from 7 o'clock p.m. to 7:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, welcome to the Emancipated Mind Show. Hello, everyone. I'm Anneshia Freeman, also known as the locksmith, because I make keys for locks in the mind. Like the introduction said, I'm a master's level therapist, meaning that I have a master's in social work. I also have a master's in business administration. I'm a person in long-term recovery. And what that means is I have not used any drugs or alcohol in over 22 years. I'm also a person in long-term recovery from trauma and dysfunctional relationships. Welcome to episode 13 of the Emancipated Mind Show. This show exposes and addresses the root causes of many problems that people face in their lives. Problems such as self-sabotage, procrastination, people-pleasing, dysfunctional relationships, perfectionism, addictions, low self-esteem, codependency, and tonight's topic, unrealistic expectations. So the subtopic is labels versus expectations. So tonight I'm going to talk about the unrealistic expectations that many people put on others simply based on the labels they wear. Now, whenever you hear me use the terms unconscious, dysfunctional, unconscious, whenever you hear me use the term dysfunctional, unconscious belief, I'm also referring to lies, issues, unaddressed issues, and the buttons people push. I use those terms interchangeably. Whenever you hear me use any of those terms, I'm talking about dysfunctional, unconscious beliefs that cause people to engage in self-defeating behaviors repeatedly, despite what they consciously know and believe. So as I stated, tonight's topic is unrealistic expectations, and I'm focusing on the unrealistic expectations people put on others based on the labels they wear. And there is a belief, an unconscious belief that causes people to engage in that behavior. The unconscious belief is if someone wears a label such as mother, father, brother, sister, friend, significant other, that person should be able to live up to the expectations you associate with that label. So this is the dysfunctional belief that drives the unrealistic expectations that many individuals put on others based on a label that they wear. Now, you have a right to have expectations. You have a right to have expectations of people. That's not what this belief is saying. This belief is saying, or this lie is saying that people should be able to meet the expectations you have simply because of the labels they wear and for no other reasons. It's really problematic when it's a label such as friend, because a lot of individuals will attach the label friend to an individual that they just met, and they don't really know that person. And then when the individual that they attach the label to is not able to live up to the expectations that they associate with the label friend, they often feel hurt and betrayed and disappointed. This belief also applies to people who wear labels, due to biological relations. So a person who wears the label mother, may not be able to live up to the expectations that society puts to the label mother. So this belief, because usually when I do an episode of my show and I'm talking about a particular dysfunctional unconscious belief, I talk about how the belief is implanted into a person's mind during the formative years. The brain is developed, the mind is programmed during those critical foundation years. And usually dysfunctional unconscious beliefs are instilled in a person's mind via maltreatment and observation. This particular debilitating belief is transmitted by society. Society conditions people to believe that if someone wears a label, they should be able to live up to the expectations that individuals associate with that label. Once again, before we start breaking this down a little further, I want to make the point: you have a right to have expectations on people, even a friend. But the issue is, before you attach the label friend to a person and the expectations that you associate with that label, you have to get to know a person. And like a well-known quote by Maya Angelou, she says, when a person shows you who they are, believe them the first time. So a lot of times, individuals who are afflicted by this dysfunctional belief, they will give people opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to meet their expectation. And those expectations are never met. And then they start feeling resentful. And the resentment is because they really believe that the individual who's letting them down by not meeting their expectations are doing so intentionally or on purpose, when actuality, that person may be just operating out of their own cognitive distortions. They may have a lot of dysfunctional unconscious beliefs that they're struggling with, that they are not aware of, that won't allow them to meet the expectation that the individual who's struggling with this belief is putting on them. So tonight, I'm going to talk about how to get free from this unrealistic expectation. And the goal of this episode is to provide you with relief from frustration, resentment, bitterness, indignation, and anger that's often produced by this unrealistic expectation, expecting people to be able to meet your expectations simply based on a label they wear. And so what I'm going to do tonight is share an excerpt from my workbook. This is one of my workbooks, The Adult Reenactment of the Childhood Script. So I'm going to read some sections from this particular workbook, from the chapter Labels versus Expectations. That's a chapter in this workbook. I don't know if you can see it based on the glare from the camera, but I'm going to read some excerpts and I'm going to go over some of the questions on the worksheet. I have 2 worksheets that address this issue. So I'm going to read the first paragraph and then I'll talk about it a little bit. People attach certain unspoken expectations to labels. Labels such as mother, father, friend, husband, employer, and church member all have different definitions, which are relative to the individual defining the label. The confusion and disappointment comes from the relative factor. People's unconscious definitions of certain labels are often a product of society propaganda, while individuals' unconscious definitions are derived from osmotic and thematic conditioning that occurred during the formative years. So let me break that down and explain what I mean by that. So a lot of times society will communicate to individuals that a friend should be trustworthy, loyal, caring, supportive, strong, respectful, fun, down to earth. And there's nothing wrong with expecting a friend to have those characteristics and traits. But for a lot of individuals, they were raised in environments in which they observe people who wore the label friends mistreat each other. They observe people who considered themselves a friend to a particular individual have the personality traits of being callous and mean and disrespectful and being disloyal. And so unconsciously, they attach those characteristics to the label friend unconsciously. But consciously, they still believe what society has told them they should expect from a friend, someone who's faithful and strong and dependable, someone you can trust. So their unconscious mind will set them up. So let me give you a real life example to help you understand this. So I've worked as a counselor and a therapist for years. And so when I do this group with people, labels versus expectations, one of the things I do when I start the group out is I say, how many of you have ever had a two-faced, backstabbing, untrustworthy friend? And usually every person in my cognitive restructuring group raises their hand. And I'm not surprised. Years ago, I would have raised my hand also. And so I am aware at that point that they struggle with this unconscious belief. If a person wears a label, they should be able to live up to the expectations you associate with that label. Because when people were raising their hand, they were upset. They were like, yes, that happens all the time. And they started calling people's names out. Yeah, it's a shame how they treat me. And it's really not funny. I'm laughing because of some of the colorful ways in which they describe these people that they were calling friends. And so I asked them, I said, well, what do you expect from a friend? What type of personality characteristics should a friend have? And they will say all of those beautiful characteristics that society has programmed them to believe that they should expect from a friend, which they have a right to expect, such as someone who's caring, supportive, loyal, strong, fun, down to earth. But that hasn't been their experiences because their unconscious belief system tells them that you can just put a label on a person and they should be able to live up to the expectations and that you associate with that label. And if they don't, then you just be upset, but you still have the label on them. Or you take the label off of them, like you remove the label friend from them, but then they will go stick the label on someone else they just met a week ago. And then it happens again. They get hurt. They get disappointed because they don't really know those people. And so if you want to call someone a friend and you want that friend, that person to have some, the characteristics that you associate with that label, then you have to find people who have the personality traits so that they can meet those expectations. And so during my work with that group, I brought in some women to help me with a lifestyle comparison group. And I've mentioned it before on some of these episodes. I brought in some women who have been raised in a very healthy environment. Now, no one's life is perfect, but I found some women who volunteered to help me with my group. They worked at a major corporation that required that their executives do community service. So they volunteered to help me with my group. And they came in once a week and they did a lifestyle comparison group where they would talk to the people in my group about how they were raised. And when they were talking about how they were raised, how they were treated and what they observed growing up, I was writing their healthy beliefs on this big whiteboard. And so they didn't have this unconscious belief that if a person wears a label, they should be able to live up to the expectations you associate with that label. They didn't have other collaborating dysfunctional beliefs, such as people close to you hurt and abuse you. You have to accept abuse without question. Your feelings are not important. They didn't have those beliefs. They had the functional beliefs. That's on the other side of my cognitive restructuring cards. So after the women would present and talk about their lives, I would allow the women in the group to ask the guest speaker questions. And so I never forget one young lady asking one of the presenters, have you ever had a two-faced, backstabbing friend? And the woman said, no. She looked at us. She said, absolutely not. She said, at work, I have to be, in my professional life at work, I have to be around people like that because they work there. So I have to interact with them. She said, when I'm out running errands and doing my day-to-day activities, I may encounter someone who's mean and rude, like a cashier that's rude or a salesperson that's mean and rude. She said, but in my own personal life, on my time, when I can choose who I'm around, why would I choose to be around someone like that? And for heaven's sake, why would I call them a friend? That's how differently she thought about the label friend. She couldn't imagine putting that label on anyone who couldn't meet her expectations for friendship. And that meant she had to vet them. That means that she had to do her due diligence to get to know who that person was before she put them in a friend category. So I'm going to read another paragraph from this section of my workbook. Now, what would make a person with a particular conscious expectation of a friend find someone with the opposite personality characteristics and label that person a friend? It would have to be his or her unconscious belief system working hand in hand with his or her emotional drugs of choice to re-experience the familiar pain of the past. So let me explain and break down what that is, what that emotional drugs of choice aspect is all about. One noted expert in the fields of neuroscience and psychology, he says because of these unconscious influences, and he's talking about unconscious beliefs, unconscious scripts from our childhood. I just happen to have them on 4.5 by 6.5 cards. But he says because of these unconscious influences, people tend to seek out individuals and experiences that create the same familiar, not okay emotional atmosphere that was an earlier part of their lives. And that's why on each of my cognitive restructuring cards, I have the feelings. You see these feeling words that are around the dysfunctional beliefs. These are examples of the emotional atmosphere that's associated with the belief. And for this particular belief that we're doing today, the feelings are trapped, frustrated, humiliated, angry, indignant, bitter, rejected, hurt. The expert says people seek out, and it's unconscious. They don't even know they're doing it. They seek out. They don't accidentally stumble across. They seek out people and experiences that create the same familiar, not okay emotional atmosphere that was an earlier part of their existence. He says it's two reasons they do it. One, because it's familiar. He said what is familiar is easier to accept than what is unfamiliar, even if it's painful. He says the second reason people do it is because there's a part of their mind that has some unfinished business. I call it the unfinished business file. It's just a part of their mind that has some unfinished business with people who hurt him or her during the formative years. And that part, a lot of people refer to it as the unconscious child, the inner child, the wounded child. Different people use different labels. It's just a part of your mind that has the feelings, frustrations, resentments, and memories from your childhood, unaddressed issues that need to be addressed and can be addressed. They don't have to stay there. That unfinished business file can be addressed, but a lot of people are not aware of it and they haven't addressed it. And so that part of their mind, this expert says, will make them find people who remind them of the individuals they have unfinished business with from their childhood and try to fix what was broke during the formative years. They will try to make a person who's mean and controlling and untrustworthy and disrespectful. They're going to try to make that person be trustworthy and loyal and caring and respectful and strong. That part of their mind is like something was broke a long time ago. Something was wrong with the script. Something was wrong with the scenes in the script. So they will do these. And that's why the name of my workbook is The Adult Reenactment of the Childhood Script. And so a lot of people have been doing this on different sets with different people. And they'll put these labels on them, the label friend, the label significant other. And in reality, for a lot of people, those dysfunctional relationships are unfinished business from their childhood. And so this in it, but it's supported by a lot of dysfunctional, unconscious beliefs. And this is one of them. If a person wears a label, they should be able to live up to the expectations you associate with that label. So I want to talk about how that looks. So I'll break down some of these questions that's on my worksheet. And so the worksheet, and I have a couple worksheets, but I'll do the level 1 worksheet. I have different levels to bring people's awareness up slowly. So we did the label friend. So I put the label friend that will go in the first box. It says, what's the label? So the second box on the worksheet says, what are your expectations? What are your expectations when you attach that label friend to people? And so people who have worked with me over the years, who've completed the worksheet with me, they would say loving, warm, caring, kind, trustworthy, considerate, fun, adventurous, encouraging, understanding, strong, brave. Those are just a few examples of the expectations that they associate with the label friend. But then a lot of times I'm like, I would ask people, where do you meet these people that you put this label on that has these built-in expectations you just described? And a lot of times it's people that they met, at the bar last week, somebody they met in the grocery store 2 weeks ago. Sometimes it's childhood friends, but when we that people from their childhood that they've labeled friends, but when we unpack those relationships, they go straight to the dysfunction. They like, we've been friends since childhood. And let me tell you how they treat me or how they mistreat me. And they're talking about maltreatment that they've endured for years from a person that they have the label friend attached to. And they haven't changed their expectation. They still display or describe feeling hurt, betrayed, indignant, rejected, angry, based on the maltreatment that they're receiving from people that they attach the label friend to. So after they describe their expectations, which is that they're going to be loving, caring, trustworthy, the next box on the worksheet says, well, what is the reality? What is the reality? What type of people do you have in your life and have you had in your life in the past? What were some of their personality characteristics that you call, and these are people you call friends. So when they're filling out this worksheet, they also have a list of personality characteristics, a sheet that has negative personality characteristics and positive personality characteristics. So when they describe the reality of the personality traits of the people that they call friend, they've used terms like jealous, untrustworthy, inconsiderate, intolerant, discouraging, irresponsible, unforgiving. And so then I have them put their expectations right up under the reality. So they had already put their expectations in another box, kind, loving, caring. So, but I make them put it right there in the same box with the reality. So you got the reality and you got the expectations, right? So then the next box says, what needs to change? What needs to change? Because a lot of individuals think it's the people that need to change. So they go through all type of antics trying to get these people that they have labeled friend to change. And I could be talking about another label, significant other. It happens the exact same way. And so they go through all sorts of antics. They accept abuse, hoping that the person will change because they see that they're willing to tolerate the maltreatment, hoping that they will change. They are nice and overextend themselves to these people who are mistreating them, that they've labeled friends, hoping that the person will eventually feel guilty and stop being a bad friend and start treating them better. And it never happens. The end of story. Roll credits. It never happens. And so under what? So there's a box on a worksheet that has what needs to change and how do I make the changes? So what we've talked about in the group, we talk about it together. What do you need to change? So some examples of what we've come up with over the years is that what needs to change? The people they choose to associate with who have shown them that they do not have the capacity or desire to treat them as they want to be treated. That needs to change. And it's not to character assassinate these people that they need to stop associating with. It just says, hey, maybe you can associate with them, but you need to take the label friend off of them and put some boundaries up to protect yourself from some of the issues they struggle with. Because those people may be struggling with a lot of victim beliefs. You struggling with victim beliefs that make you put that unrealistic expectation. The victim beliefs, my stack of 100 most commonly seen unconscious victim lies, they're blue, and my set of the 100 most commonly seen villain lies are red. And so, this is a victim belief that people should be able to live up to the expectations you associate with a label. But when we're in that group, I help the people see that, sometimes the people that you need to disassociate with because they cannot treat you in the way that you want to be treated, they're not bad people. They have their own cognitive distortions that they need help with. They may struggle with the villain version of the belief. So here's the victim version. People should be able to live up to the expectations, you associate with a label. But then the villain version of the belief is, if you wear a label, people should be okay with the fact that you wear the label, and they should accept whatever you bring to the table. There's a lot of individuals that think like that. It's unconscious, but they have this unconscious belief. They're like, okay, I'm your friend, and you just have to deal with whatever I bring to the table. However I treat you, deal with it. I'm your friend, but deal with it. And so you have these two dysfunctional beliefs collaborating. And so they also may struggle with the belief, the people who are mistreating individuals that they call friend, they might also struggle with the unconscious belief. If you provide for a person in one area in a relationship, it absolves you of any other responsibilities in the relationship. They should be grateful you do blank, and blank is whatever you do. A lot of people have that at least attitude. Well, at least I do ABC. At least I do EFG. And so that's the way they think. That doesn't mean they're horrible people. That's just some unconscious beliefs that they struggle with. They may also deal with the belief, you don't have to deal with problems. Leave them for someone else to figure out. So if there is a problem in the relationship that's affecting the friendship, or a problem that they need to address so that they can treat people better, they have an unconscious belief says, no, you don't have to deal with that problem. And then their belief system, their issues are collaborating. They should be glad at least you do this. At least you wear the label friend. And if they got a problem, you don't have to deal with the relationship problem. You mistreat somebody, they get hurt and they don't talk to you for 2 weeks, and then you get back with them and hang out and act like nothing ever happened. So that's a lot of dysfunction going on. And that's a lot of hurt and anger and frustration attached to the label friend. So I'm going to read the functional belief that challenges this lie. I told you I use those terms interchangeably. The lie, if a person wears a label, that person should be able to live up to the expectations you associate with that label. And we're talking about the label friend tonight. I may do another episode next week and talk about a different label, either significant other or parent. So I'm going to read the functional belief on the back. Just because a person wears a label doesn't mean that he or she has the character content you associate with that label. In fact, you probably don't have all the wonderful traits that others associate with the labels you wear. So skip the indignation. Too many individuals spend their lives living in the land of should, SHOULD, hoping and praying that the people they are counting on will not disappoint them for the 12th millionth time. That's a waste of time and energy. In the real world, anybody can produce a child, but that doesn't mean they are capable of loving, caring for, and nurturing that child. Anyone can go inside a church building and sit down, but that doesn't mean that person is warm and loving. You can start examining your expectations that you put on others to see if they're realistic, and you can stop You can stop, and it's a process learning how to stop, but you can stop assigning expectations at random just based on a label someone wears. There are people who wear particular labels by birth, but you can determine what expectations you have for them based on their character. Now, when you're a child, you have no say so in the matter. Like if someone wears the label mother, father, sister, brother, you have a right as a child to be treated with dignity and respect from anyone you encounter, especially your family. But that's not the reality. And in childhood, you don't have a choice. But in your adulthood, you have a choice how closely you interact with people, no matter what label they wear. Mother, brother, uncle, cousin, sister. If their character content shows you that they can't meet the expectations that you associate with that label, it's time for you to change your expectations. You don't have to stop interacting with your family, but the expectations, if they're never met, you have to look at the reality. They may not have the capacity to meet them. I remember when I forgave my mother, for the years of things that I endured based on issues that she struggled with. It took me years to get to the point where I was able to forgive her, right? And I was able to have some peace in my spirit because I took the expectations off that I had that were embedded in the label mother. She did the best she could with the issues that she struggled with. She did the best she could with all of the different experiences that she had and the lack of information that she had. And I had to realize that it didn't mean that the trauma I experienced didn't impact me. It did. It had a major impact on me. But as an adult, I was able at a certain point to go get the help I needed to address the trauma. And I learned that I could put the label mother on people, family of origin versus family of choice. I discovered that I still wanted people to play the mother role or the sister role or the friend role. I still wanted that. But I learned that I could put that label on someone who had the capacity to meet the expectations I associated with that label. My whole life changed. There was a lot of things that changed my life, but that was a major aspect of the change. That I stopped expecting people to live up to my expectations based on a label. And in a lot of cases, it was a label I attached. In some cases, it was the label, by birth, family members. But in some cases, it was that label friend, significant other. I kept randomly throwing that label on people with all my long list of expectations. Most of them were unrealistic anyway. But even the ones that were realistic, it became dysfunctional because I was putting the expectations with the label and applying them to people who I didn't know that well, or in some cases, people who had showed me that I don't have the capacity to meet those expectations. I don't have the desire in some cases to meet those expectations. That's not who I am. I remember when I was in active addiction, and as I said earlier in the show, I have over 22 years clean. I remember in active addiction because I was social. They had to socialize me into those subcultures associated with drugs and alcohol in the streets of Detroit. I had a lot of issues that caused me to have an addiction, but I was not raised in that environment, and I didn't understand a lot of the subcultures that you have to learn how to navigate when you have an addiction. And so I'm around people who had nicknames like Shady, Grady, Tricky, Ricky, low down Canaan. And I remember one day after someone named Snake, that was his nickname, someone named Snake had betrayed me for about the fifth time. He had deceived me for about the fifth time. And I remember looking at him saying, I was starting to learn how to, navigate. And I eventually adapted. I never simulated, but I adapted. I had to because of desperation and because of my addiction. But I remember looking at Snake and saying, you know what? You really are a snake. And he looked at me and he said, I thought you knew. I guess he was saying, like, we're giving you a fighting chance. We telling you who we are. Snake, Tricky Ricky, Shady Grady, low down. You just not figuring this out. And so I was like, oh, this is a disturbing realization. But for people who are like not in those types of subcultures, a lot of individuals still struggle. It's the same principle. It's the same issue. People showing you who they are and you not believing them and giving them opportunity. Most of that is unconscious. It's driven by dysfunctional, unconscious beliefs. But once the dysfunctional belief has been exposed, you have an opportunity now to fight it. Yeah, you can fight it now. You can say, okay, so I need to change. So what else needs to change? My expectation that people are capable of possessing all good characteristics and no negative ones. Because even if you start engaging with people who are more healthier and taking your time to get to know a person, and before you assign the label friend for them on them, put that label on them, it's still not going to be perfect. And so what we do as human beings when we become a little more emotionally intelligent is we learn to use boundaries, no matter what relationship you're in, and no matter how healthy the relationship is, you still need to set and enforce boundaries. Because we are all mixtures of weaknesses and strengths. There are no perfect people. And if you're waiting on perfect people to have friendships and to have a significant other, you're going to be waiting a long time. So you can find people who have most of the traits that you're looking for, or in some cases, all of the traits you're looking for in a friend, but they're not going to have those good traits and no negative ones. So we use boundaries to protect ourselves from each other's weaknesses so that we can enjoy each other's strengths. We use boundaries to protect ourselves from each other's liabilities so that we can enjoy each other's assets. So another thing that needs to change for people who struggle with this dysfunctional belief, if a person wears a label, they should be able to live up to the expectations you associate with that label. Another thing we identified in my group as we filled out the worksheet is that they need to change and recognize that their failure to set boundaries with people has been causing them to be mistreated. So they need to change their failure to set boundaries. They need to start learning, because some people have to learn. Some people it's not, they're just not setting boundaries. Some people don't know how. And I give them opportunity to learn. I provide them with worksheets and with handouts and recommend books that help them learn how to set and enforce boundaries. Another thing that needs to change is how soon they give people a front row seat in their life. I saw something online and I don't remember the source. I like to quote, exactly where I saw it, but I saw someone had wrote a blog, I believe, or something like that, where they were saying that you need to just stop putting people in the front row seat of your life that you just met. You giving people speaking roles, like they should be an extra until you get to know who they are. Or he said, the blog said, put them in a balcony until you get to know who they are and let their character displayed over time usher them to a better seat. And that is very powerful. I also heard one of my mentors, my spiritual mentors, and I would cite him, but I'm not sure you're allowed to say people's names like that. And I don't want them to block my video. I said his name, because I'm not associated with his work and what he does. But he said that some people are ushers. He said, so everybody not meant to be your friend. Sometimes you meet people and they're there for a particular reason or a particular season, and they're not meant to be put in a friend category. He said some people are ushers. They're supposed to show you to your seat and go back and get somebody else, meaning that some people are assigned to be in your life to guide you from point A to point B. That's their assignment on this earth, to guide people from point A to point B or point C. And then they go and they help somebody else get to point A, point B, point C. That's their calling. They're not supposed to be your friend. And in fact, they've never been past point C. And so a lot of people get trapped in toxic relationships, dysfunctional relationships, out of a distorted sense of loyalty. And they done labeled this usher friend, and now they feel trapped in the relationship because this person helped them. That the person, that's their assignment, is to help you. You can show gratitude and you can, reciprocate in some kind of way if you're able, but move on. And a lot of people will stay there who's supposed to go from point C to point D, but they don't go to point D because they stand with this person who showed them A, B, and C. And that person who showed them how to get from A to C has never been past C. And that's not saying anything bad about them. They may enjoy the quality of their life within those parameters. They may enjoy a good quality of life and helping people get from point A to point B to point C. And that's what they're called to do. And they have their friends there in that world that they can interact with. But there's some individuals who are supposed to go from A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. They're supposed to go the whole route. And they're supposed to meet their next guide at point C that's going to help them get from C, D, E, but they'll stay with this person they labeled friend, who was, like my spiritual mentor said, he was an usher. They were never supposed to be your friend. And then the person who's staying in that relationship that they've outgrown. They've outgrown the relationship dynamics, right? They mistakenly think this is a friend and I have to stay. I have to stay in this with this connection, but they're frustrated and angry. And over time, they start feeling resentful, right? Because they're not where they're supposed to be. And it's not the person, it's not the usher fault. If you did, because you did that, it's how. So we talked about what needs to change. Let's talk about how real quick. We get to the end of the show. I will begin redefining the relationships I have with people who have proven that they do not have my best interests at heart. Because some people, they don't have your best interests at heart, but you get that label friends attached to them. I will make sure that I am displaying the qualities that I'm seeking in others, because sometimes people are expecting individuals to be warm, loving, and caring and trustworthy friends, but they don't have those characteristics themselves. I will begin going to different types of places where I can meet different types of people, and I will begin reaching out to positive individuals. But you still have to vet them to see if they're a good fit to be a friend. I will learn how to set boundaries with individuals. So that's all for this episode 13 of the Emancipated Mind Show. Our topic tonight was unrealistic expectations. The subtopic was labels versus expectations. I've been reading from a section of my workbook, The Adult Reenactment of the Childhood Script. If you're interested in this workbook, you can go to my website, AnnesiaConsulting.com, click on the store page, and this workbook is available for purchase. I also have my workbook, The 100 Most Commonly Seen Unconscious Lies, which is sold with these two sets of 100 victim lies and 100 villain lies. You can also purchase the set on my store page on my website. I have a workbook entitled My Unaddressed Issues Make My Budget and My Schedule. Each of these dysfunctional unconscious beliefs make demands on people's time and on their money. I also have life coaching packages. So I'll put the link to my store page in the comment section, and I'll also put the link to my store page in the comment section. Thank you again for watching my show, The Emancipated Mind. I hope to see you back next week. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching The Emancipated Mind Show. Join me every week live on Facebook and YouTube on Thursdays from 7 o'clock p.m. to 7:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For more information about my products and services, feel free to visit my website, AnnesiaConsulting.com, or my website, AnnesiaSpeaks.com. I can also be reached via email at afreeman@AnnesiaConsulting.com. I'll see you next week.